Hi, everybody, and welcome to this exciting session. I'm really pleased to have Nick with me here from Plastic Ingenuity. Nick is a very experienced operator and has a team across multiple different locations that he's going to share with us about that business. And what's particularly exciting is that we're going to hear from Nick about his and the company's journey with industrial automation. It's actually been happening over many, many years, over a number of different iterations that bring us to the point where we are today with a lot of experience, a lot of insights, and lessons to be shared with you all. So welcome, Nick, and I look forward to this discussion. So Nick, let's start, if you could just maybe introduce yourself and your role. And then I think it would be really valuable to hear about Plastic Ingenuity. I'd love to hear about the history of the company, how it began, and in a little bit more detail, tell us what the company does and where it's going, and whatever else you can share that give us a really good feel and insight into the business.
Yeah, so I'm Nick Mellenthin. I'm the engineering manager at Plastic Ingenuity in Maumelle. Plastic Ingenuity is a custom thermoformer. We started in 1972, so we were 50 years old this year. We started by making cheese molds. It turned out that the molds or the packages that were delivered, the company couldn't deliver on time, and so over a weekend, the former owner of the company, he was able to deliver the packages over a weekend. He had his whole family making parts over the weekend. Kind of a neat story. But today we do custom thermoforms for the food industry, the medical industry, cell phone industry. We do drink cup lids. You name it, we do it. It's custom thermoforming, so it's specific to whatever the customer needs. They bring us an item, we design the package for it. We build the molds, we produce the plastic parts, and we're able to turn around product much faster than anybody else in a matter of weeks instead of a matter of months.
And how big is the company? Give us how many locations? Give us a sense of some of the facts and the figures about the business so everyone can sort of understand the scale.
Yeah, so we have about 800 employees. We have 5 locations in the US, and we have 2 in Mexico. We're scattered throughout, so we can provide coverage to the United States.
Okay, great. Very good. So, Nick, one of the things that sort of is generally very common when we talk with organizations like yours, and I'd love your perspective on this, is that there seem to be a whole range of market trends that are influencing us as we think about manufacturing, whether it's labor shortages or trying to upskill our workers and our operators, or in some cases, people are affected by supply chain, and some organizations are thinking about reshoring production. There are a number of these mega trends that are out there. Could you maybe give us a little bit of indication of how are those impacting, if they are at all, Plastic Ingenuity?
Yeah, certainly. We've struggled with finding personnel that are equipped to work in manufacturing, and so that has been a real struggle for us. The other thing is a real safety focus, and so that is something that pushes us towards automation. It does some of the tasks that we would prefer our team members don't have to do.
Got it. Understood. And you mentioned automation, and obviously something we want to talk about today is your journey, because I know that this is something that's not new to you. In fact, it's why I think this is such a valuable exercise, is that you've been on this journey for some time. But perhaps that's a great place to start, is that where did this begin for Plastic Ingenuity and yourself, and give us a little bit of context for how you started thinking about bringing in these types of solutions into the business, and where that began.
Yeah, so it really started before I began at Plastic Ingenuity. We as a company began implementing some robotics onto our thermoformers, and that very first step was robotics picking the parts off of the thermoformers, which was a very basic step, but it saved from needing 2 people on the line to reducing it down to 1 person on the line. and that allowed us to run more equipment. We didn't reduce the number of employees we had here. We ran more equipment. And so that was kind of the beginning step for us. And then as we've seen the trends grow and the need for more automation, we've pursued different avenues, whether that be palletizing or box erecting or equipment moving. We use automation throughout.
Understood. For a lot of people who are listening to this, it's sometimes challenging to convince all of the different people inside of an organization that bringing these kinds of solutions into the business is something that's a priority. And I would be very interested to hear about your experience. It sounds like this has almost been happening for some time, but was that driven from leadership within the organization, or was it that the operators were showcasing that there were challenges here? How did the support get generated inside of the business to make these kinds of investments and these important decisions?
Yeah, so we've all heard the expression, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Often our personnel on the floor, the more that they speak up about the assistance that they need, the stronger we can pursue some of those things. So it typically comes from the floor. The people on the floor say, hey, we're really struggling to do this, and that gives me the leverage to then begin to go to the management team and pursue other options to help with those tasks.
And when you do that, when you go to the management team and you start to say, hey, look, we've identified this opportunity, what are the kinds of things that they are interested in understanding? Because it's not an insignificant decision to take. What are the kinds of questions they have? What are the kinds of evidence they're looking for? And I'm thinking of giving our audience some indication of how do they begin to start to justify these things?
So our group here, we are very production focused. The CEO of the company, he was one of the people who was teaching how to operate the machines years ago. He understands every step of the business, which is a pretty neat thing. So he wants to know, how is this going to affect the team on the floor? And then also the group of people that we go to, typically the plant managers and the CFO and the CEO, they want to understand the payback period for this and how this is going to affect the team long term. We're not just looking for a solution that's going to help us next week. We want to know that the solution that we have is going to be productive long term. So those are some of the things that we get questioned about.
As people think about starting this journey, and based on your experience, can you share with us maybe advice for how to think about getting approvals internally? Are there certain things to consider when trying to get budgets in place? Are there other factors that come to bear that people who are thinking about doing this should be aware of, that based on your experience, these things are going to come up, and these are some of the ways you can actually prepare for that and anticipate some of the challenges or the questions that you're going to be asked internally, or needs that you should have considered to present?
Yeah, so we have a list of capital expenditures that we look at for the next year, and we have to budget a specific number that we believe is appropriate for that. And we typically do that based on prior knowledge. Some of the items that we have to budget for, it's a known expense, it's going to cost this much. And some of them are new projects, such as a palletizing system. And the industry is always changing. So we have to use kind of our best judgment when we pick a number that is going to be appropriate for that. And then as we begin to do research, often we'll learn that maybe the price is different than what we had anticipated. And so we have to justify that difference in price to the group that we present the solution to, and they have to understand that we are making the best decision that we can based upon that.
Yeah, and so as you think about, you obviously can get those budgetary prices, and you can do that research, and as you've mentioned, are there any other kinds of should people be thinking about project plans and timelines and these kinds of things, or are there resources that will be required that will also influence the total impact of bringing in an initiative like this and ensuring that it's successful, not just in the selection process, but in the delivery and implementation and operating process?
Yeah, so often there is questions surrounded operating it. Do we have sufficient cooled water? Do we have, the plant resources able to handle what is needed? We get questions like that. And again, we have to justify that to the group and make sure that we are sufficiently planned for it. And there will always be something that pops up that you were unprepared for, and you just kind of have to work with it. Our group is very good about rolling with the changes, and so we have to be ready for that.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, and I understand that. I also informs probably if you find that you have an organization that you feel will also roll with it with you. I understand that. Are there questions around training your operators? If I think about bringing in something like a palletizer, it's clearly important that the application is going to be easy to use, it's going to be intuitive. How do you think about some of those kinds of things, and whether your systems are going to be simple enough and intuitive enough for your operators to utilize them effectively?
In this particular project, we spent a great deal of time with the group that we presented this to, explaining that to begin with, that the implementation of this was directly due to how simple the programming was and the ability for our team on the floor to do it. I expressed to them that I was able to program boxes myself in 10 minutes with no training. And so that was very positive, because I am not a program controls kind of guy. I'm a mechanical, hands-on person. So if I can learn how to do it very quickly, I can certainly teach it to other people. Also, the understanding is that the team will come in and train our team on how to do this. So that was certainly weighed on the decision.
Very helpful, thank you. And so I know that as we discussed doing this today, one of the things that you shared with me, Nick, is that this is not your first rodeo. And you talked about palletizing, and you talked about box erecting and some of these solutions. And I know that you shared with me that actually the whole topic of bringing in these solutions is something you've been doing for some time. And you've had a lot of experience there of what works well and maybe what's challenging. Perhaps you could give us a little bit of an insight into how that started for yourself, how you brought in different solutions, and what that's led you to determine are the important criteria in making these kinds of decisions based on your own experiences over multiple projects.
Yeah, so we began exploring some more automation, I would say about 10 years ago. And we looked for further solutions for box erecting, which is a pretty basic step. And then we began inserting bags into our boxes for our food grade packaging. And that was a little bit more advanced. We spent a good deal of time at trade shows, observing the products that were out there. We observed what was important for the team on the floor. It was extremely important to them that specific steps be followed to make these automation pieces work for them. So I really look for what affects the team on the floor. That's the most important thing to me. I've been here for 16 years. A portion of that time I worked on the floor. And so everything is more well received when the team on the floor gets some input into it. And so that's what we listen to when trying to make some of these decisions. And then we learn a lot at the trade shows. You're able to kind of filter through what different groups have. And then that's sort of where we go from there.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. So when we look particularly at the solutions that we've worked on together, my understanding is that that you've actually gone through a number of different exercises of trying to find the right solution, and you've learned a lot there from what matters. One of the things that that I think is interesting is trying to justify the investment and trying to make sure that that ROI, that payback is there. But are there any other areas where you use to demonstrate that there's value being arrived? Is there anything else that would matter for the business as people think about building that case? Anything else? Any other advice you'd have for folks there, and you're based on your own experiences?
We look a lot at safety. Safety is one of those items that currently today we have people stacking boxes that are too tall. And so the solution that we're looking at in particular from the group is a palletizing solution. And that safety investment to having a robot do a job that I would prefer a person didn't have to do, that is a number that is very important to me.
Understood. And if we think about the palletizing, how did you go out and identify solutions? If I was in your situation, if I knew that health and safety and workers' compensation was really important to me, I wanted to remove risk from the business. I recognized that I wanted to look at ways to stop that squeaky wheel that you described, and I want to find ways to alleviate some of the dangerous work that may exist and redeploy my valuable team members. How did you start looking for solutions? What advice do you have for people who are trying to think about where to find this and how to sort through all the various options that might exist?
So I began at a trade show. I went to a trade show. I had one day to go through the PAC Expo, and I walked, I think it was 15 miles that day, going through the entire show, stopping at the booths that were the type of items that I was looking for. And so that was a step of the process. We drove 5 hours to do some testing at another facility to make sure that the palletizer that we were looking at was able to do what we needed it to do. That helped a little bit. I got some emails from some other colleagues about palletizers that they were looking at. We did some homework to try to narrow down where we wanted to go. And once we finally found the solution that seemed to fit the best, we made arrangements to go and see a palletizing system from your company that's very similar. And so not only did I get to see the palletizing system, I also got a tour of their whole facility and got an understanding that the group that I was talking to knew what they were talking about. And that's important to me. So that's part of the journey of how we settled where we're at.
Great. Thank you for that. I think it makes a lot of sense, and the ability to go and validate with others and see what others are experiencing, and certainly I think participating in that community over time is also very valuable. So one thing that comes up sometimes, because traditionally this is how businesses have found solutions, is they place a lot of emphasis on being able to have local support. And sometimes there's a view that, well, if I don't have local support, if I'm on the other side of the country, then it's simply not going to work for me. I'm interested in your perspective on that, because given that you're part of an organization that's been deploying these solutions and operating them for quite some time, and you've had a lot of experience of what's right and what's wrong and what works and what doesn't work, how have you, but maybe there's a journey you've gone through, and even in that, about what you've learned about what matters and how you've evaluated those sort of in the past and then recently?
Yeah, so we have a handful of solutions in our building for different automation things. At one point in time, I had the idea that the closer the company was, the better it would be, because I can get support. And so I purchased a palletizer 3 years ago that was out of a company that is 2 hours from me. I thought this will be great. They'll be able to come in and service it. Turned out that they didn't have programmers that could do it long term. And so they don't have any support for it today. So as much as I wanted to say that a local company was going to provide me the best support, it did not work that way. I also have products in here from other countries across the ocean. I have found that my support is better based upon the size of the company and the group that supports it. And so that is more important. So I always want to check and see who the technical team is, who the team is afterward, and you learn a lot from those people.
Yeah, very, very helpful. And certainly we're seeing that as technology advances, our ability to support you remotely and support you through a cloud experience. These are all ways of ensuring that we can deliver a very high quality of service wherever we may be located. And so I think it's consistent with perhaps your own experiences, which is good to hear. So you described how you went and you saw a similar application at a different facility from a different organization. You did a lot of research, you talked to the organization. Were there any other things that either you did or in hindsight you would have done that you would advise people to be thinking about when they're trying to select a provider and an organization to partner with, whether it's at the technical level, functionality, or even at the company level, looking for who's going to be there and support you and ensure that you're successful in this project and on an ongoing basis? Any other advice you have for folks there?
I would always pay attention to the willingness of the organization to take your input. The better job they do at taking the input that you have, say you notice that if you rotate this or do that or added this sensor, whatever the input is, if they can take that and they can implement it, that's important. The after sales group is also so important. The actual people who come do the installation, if they mesh well with you, you are going to have a better result. Just because somebody is able to sell it does not mean that their team will be able to install it. So the group that comes to do the installation is probably more important than anybody else.
Got it. Okay. Understood. And so if you think about where you are today, we're in the beginning of this journey together, but how are things going so far? You made that decision. You're saying, okay, we're committing to this path forward. What's your experience been like so far?
My experience has been very good. We've been able to bring problems, and your group has been able to come up with solutions for them. They are able to, I guess, work on the fly. They're able to, take those and run with them. We're moving into the point where we're working with the group who is actually going to do the installation. And the personnel that I'm working with, we mesh very well. Has good answers, provides good feedback. This is the first group that has come to install something that we're doing weekly checkups on. I know exactly where we are. I know how everything is going. Most companies, I get an email once every 6 months and they tell me that, oh, we're delayed. And this is not that. I am seeing good communication, and it's all going very well. Okay.
Well, that's good to hear. It's encouraging stuff. If you think about over the next few months and you're in operation, things are up and running, are there certain measures that you will look to determine that it's in fact delivering on the promise and that you can be confident to go back to your colleagues and your sponsors and say, look, I set out these criteria for success, and in fact we're realizing these benefits and these improvements in our business? Are any of those things that you would identify, or are there any metrics that you'd identify that people should be thinking about as they plan their own journey?
That's a good question. I do not have any metrics specifically to go off of. I usually base it on the team on the floor. Like I said before, I came from the floor. What the team on the floor, how they react to it and how their input back to me that is more important than anything else. If the team on the floor is able to use the solution that we've come up with, and they're satisfied with it, that is by far the most important thing to me.
Yeah, very good. And then as we come to sort of wrapping this section up, if you were to go through this experience again, obviously I know you've done this multiple times, but every time we learn something, anything you do differently?
That's a really good question. I don't have anything that that stands out to me today. If you ask me in 2 months, I might have something to say. I'm excited to see the implementation of this. I am a little bit concerned. I ordered my own conveyors separate, and I do not think they are going to arrive in time. So I may have been better off to allow your team to implement the entire solution instead of me thinking that I can arrive my own conveyors. So we'll see.
Okay, well, we'll see. We'll see. I think certainly our goal is to give you that flexibility, right? As you know, and we've spent a lot of time really thinking about how do we give you the chance to design solutions that are right for you, and certainly from a completeness perspective. Those opportunities exist certainly with Vention, but they also exist if you were to have existing systems you want to integrate with or bring in other systems. So maybe, Nick, and put you on the spot here, if you were to give everybody listening 2 or 3 pieces of advice of things that they could do, they could take away and start to do now if they're beginning their journey for industrial automation, they're thinking about something like a palletizer application or something similar, or perhaps like you, that they've been down this path and it hasn't gone exactly as they have expected, and they're looking to sort of learn from that. What kinds of would advice or tips or tactics that could go and be implemented pretty quickly to help them on this journey would you provide? What would you say?
Don't be afraid to ask questions. The more questions you ask, the better you can filter through the group that you're looking at. Ask to go see. The best thing for me, I want to go see, I want to go put my hands on it, I want to test it. The company that allowed me to come in and visit their facility, they let me program a box while I was there. I entered the robot zone. I tested the safeties. I wanted to see it work. I'm a hands-on person. If I don't get to do it with my own hands, I didn't learn anything. So go and see, go try it, go learn about it. That's my advice.
Well, you're in lovely Wisconsin, and in other. Well, actually, no, you're not. You're not. Are you in Arkansas?
I'm in Arkansas. I'm back and forth. I'm all over the place.
Okay. Well, okay. We got a couple different locations. I hope that we can have some people come and see you in operation and do exactly what you did and pay it forward at some point in the future. But Nick, thank you very much for your insights. It's valuable, and I really appreciate what you've shared about your colleagues on the floor who are operating and making their lives better. I deeply appreciate that. That's what we're certainly here to try and accomplish and partner with you. We're excited about the journey we're on together. We're committed to your success and that of Plastic Ingenuities. And in the coming weeks and months, we look forward to kind of having you back and hearing how things are progressing and continuing to support you in that journey as you automate these solutions in the business. Let me give you the last few words, Nick. Anything you'd like to add? Anything that I missed? Anything you want to share with the folks before we go to some questions?
I don't have anything further. I appreciate the time to share my experience.
All right, very good. Okay, well, let's see what we have for questions. We'll go to that next.